Good afternoon, and welcome to our leadership conversation with Lieutenant General John Thompson and Steve Isakowitz, sharing our diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. First, a few housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded. All microphones in the forum have been muted, with the exception of the moderator and the panelists. Questions being filtered to panelists were submitted in advance at the time of registration, and therefore the chat box is not available as it is disabled during the event. Any additional questions or comments may be forwarded to communications@elsegundo.org. This is the first in a series of discussions with El Segundo business leaders. Hi, my name is Shad McFadden, and I serve as the chairman of the City of El Segundo's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion DEI Committee. I will be moderating today's discussion. Last year in 2020, while experiencing a global pandemic, America also experienced a great deal of civil and racial unrest, brought about following the death of George Floyd. Shortly thereafter, the City of El Segundo took the steps necessary to set up, interview, and appoint our city's first DEI committee. The DEI committee's purpose is to inspire and activate efforts to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into the City of El Segundo's decisions, service delivery, and policies to improve the well-being for all of our communities. Another way to say this is that we would like for all those who live, work, and visit El Segundo to feel welcome when they are here. Guiding principles for the committee include number one, a learning mindset. We must learn from our history to understand where we are today. Also, accountability. We need to take accountability for any inequities which exist. And number three, community. We must listen to and value the voice of the community we serve. When listening to these voices, you'll find that there are multiple communities inside of our city of El Segundo. We listen to all of these voices because the experiences are different between members of different communities. We formed 4 subcommittees around 4 key areas identified by City Council, where we continue to focus our efforts. The Public Safety Subcommittee, where we are working directly with the El Segundo Police Department. The ESPD opened their doors to us and gave us 30 hours of their time over 9 weeks to take a deep dive into policies and procedures, historical cases, the training they provide for their officers, and what a day in the life of an officer looks like in El Segundo. Most importantly, the members of the subcommittee established personal relationships during this time, which help us to partner effectively as we move forward on our DEI journey. Our open communication here is key. The Citywide Organization Subcommittee is currently working with city management to look at citywide policies and procedures, as well as best practices in other cities to determine if there are areas for improvement. This group has already moved forward with a few new investments. The Community at Large Subcommittee will be reaching out through a series of surveys and other tactics to hear from those who live, work, and spend time recreationally here in El Segundo. They will also be establishing a two-way communications to ensure that folks can get updates and information easily, as well as have a way to reach out to the DEI committee directly. As I mentioned earlier, we believe that DEI investments made must reflect the community that is being served, so this dialogue is a very important one. Finally, the Local Economy Subcommittee, where we are focusing on the thriving business community here in El Segundo. Our local businesses are an important part of our city, and we may have many organizations who are best in class at what they do. This provides us with a great opportunity to partner, explore, and uncover some best practices not only in business, but in some of the social aspects that our employees are experiencing as well. We will be hearing from 2 of those organizations represented here today in the Aerospace Corporation and the Space and Missile Systems Center at the Los Angeles Air Force Base. Now, I would like to introduce to you Mr. Steve Isakowitz. Steve Isakowitz is President and CEO of the Aerospace Corporation, where he leads a team of more than 4,000 employees committed to solving the hardest problems in space. Aerospace is a national nonprofit corporation that operates a federally funded research and development center addressing complex problems across the space enterprise focused on agility, innovation, and objective technical leadership. At Aerospace, Isakowitz sits at the nexus of the defense, civil, and commercial space sectors, overseeing efforts to outpace threats to the country's national security while nurturing the technologies needed to further a new era of space commercialization and exploration. Over the course of his more than 30-year career, Isakowitz has served in prominent roles across the government, private, space, and technology sectors, including at NASA, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the White House Office of Management and Budget. Prior to joining Aerospace, he was president of Virgin Galactic, where his responsibilities included the development of privately funded launch systems, advanced technologies, and other new space applications. Please help me welcome Steve Isakowitz. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Chad. It really is a great opportunity to be here, and I appreciate the chance to what the city is doing here in the city of El Segundo, the city council, the DEI committee. I appreciate those 4 activities that you had mentioned and giving us the opportunity to speak today. I also want to thank General Thompson for joining us. Look forward to hearing what he's going to talk about with his great work at the Space and Missile Systems Center. For any of you who have driven down El Segundo Boulevard, you'll see that there's a bridge between Aerospace Corporation and SMC, and that really speaks to the long and storied history of the partnership between our 2 organizations. Creating a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce is something we've been working on at Aerospace. In fact, I was looking at old material from 60 years ago with our very first CEO, Ivan Gadding, signing a document committing Aerospace to the goals of diversity. And what was interesting about that, it was a document he was signing in the presence of then Vice President Lyndon Johnson. So it is not new, but certainly with what happened last year with the killing and the tragedy of George Floyd, it brought together the national dialogue that has really hit all of us. And it has caused us at Aerospace to recommit ourselves to this incredibly important issue. We've undertaken a lot of initiatives, and I look forward to speaking to them as we go through some of the questions here today, having progress on multiple fronts as we try to move forward and address this. We're proud of what we've accomplished so far, but I'll tell you, we know we have a lot to go. Just a little more background, Chad, you already gave some background of Aerospace. As you mentioned, we're a nonprofit, federally funded research and development center that provide expertise to address the hardest problems in the nation's space program. Aerospace has been a member here at El Segundo and part of the business community since 1960. Our footprint has grown. Today, we have 2,900 of our 4,000 employees are located right here in El Segundo. Hopefully, many of you, as you drive by our building, you'll notice the Circle A that's behind me. That's our emblem, and hopefully the kids in the back seat of your car will say, "Hey, is that the headquarters for Avengers?" And we often tell people, "Yes, it is." We house a lot of the superheroes that try to make a difference in today's growing challenges. What's interesting over the last 60 years is when I looked at 1961, 4% of our workforce was people of color. Today, we're at 36%. It shows how far we've come, but we know we got a lot more to go. El Segundo and Southern California has had a tremendous and exciting history in the space program and has been the hub of much of what's happened since World War II. I would argue these are, frankly, the most exciting times in our nation's space program, bar none. Just last week, as you mentioned, I had worked at Virgin Galactic earlier, and I was delighted to see Richard Branson flying into space. But I also want to take note that a very dear friend of mine who flew with him, Sarisha Banla, she talks about the fact that when she was an engineer, she was wondering whether to go into this field. And in the end, what was very compelling to her is when she saw another woman of Indian descent fly on the space shuttle and seeing someone that looks like her, how motivating that was to want to pursue such a career. We have many other things that are happening that are exciting. New launch vehicles, new satellites, more capable systems addressing the nation's national security needs. We hope to go back to the moon this decade with humans stepping back on it, robots on Mars, a telescope that's literally going to look back to the beginning of time through the Webb telescope. And we're seeing an unprecedented level of commercial activity. Morgan Stanley has projected that the commercial sector could grow as much as to a $1 trillion industry in the coming decades. Next week, I actually am looking forward to a fellowship that I host called the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program, where we're going to bring in dozens of students around the country to talk about the most exciting times that now exist in the commercial space area, which sort of brings me to where we are today. We've heard an important announcement in the last few months that the Space Systems Command will be located here in Los Angeles, which will be the main acquisition arm for the now Space Force, and I'm sure General Thompson will speak to that. As a result, I could foresee a future where El Segundo continues to be that hub of innovation and hopefully will attract that next generation of companies that will also want to base themselves here. I'm excited about what's in front of us. I'm excited as the possibilities, but the fact of the matter is, if we're going to continue to attract the kind of talent that we need in the coming years, it is important that we work with our communities, in this case, El Segundo, to make sure that it continues to be a place that is welcoming and is a place that people want to live, want to work, and want to spend time in the city. And I look forward to taking your questions, Chad. So thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. I will now introduce Lieutenant General J.T. Thompson for his opening remarks. Lieutenant General J.T. Thompson is the Commander, Space and Missile Systems Center, Los Angeles Air Force Base, California, where he is responsible for 6,000 employees nationwide and an annual budget of $9 billion. He is dual-hatted as the Air Force Program Executive Officer, or PEO, for space, where he manages the research, design, development, acquisition, launch, and sustainment of satellites and command and control systems. Over his 36-year career, Lieutenant General Thompson has served as a division chief, director, and chief of staff. He commanded the 327th Aircraft Sustainment Wing at Tinker Air Force Base and the 303rd Aeronautical Systems Wing at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where he also served as PEO for intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. He served as the PEO for Strategic Systems, Deputy PEO for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter Program, and the PEO for Tankers KC-46 Program Director. Prior to his current role, Lieutenant General Thompson was the Air Force Life Cycle Management Center Commander. Welcome, General Thompson. The floor is yours.
Hey, Shad, thanks very much for that introduction, and good afternoon to everybody in the audience. It's my honor to participate in this forum representing the United States Space Forces Space and Missile Systems Center, headquartered right here in El Segundo. As Steve alluded to, we're on the north side of El Segundo Boulevard along Douglas. Right across the street from Aerospace. We do have a bridge for our employees to get back and forth across because the Aerospace company is such great partners to us. I will tell you, though, that it is difficult to get. The only time of the year that it's difficult to get across that bridge is when Steve Isakowitz's beloved Cleveland Browns playing my Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a little bit like the Hatfields and McCoys. And we manage the flow of traffic much more carefully during that week. Shad, I really appreciate you doing this. It's a really important conversation. And Steve, to you, just for being that catalyst that helped bring this event together about a very important topic to all of us. Thanks also to the Joint Aerospace, Space and Missile Systems Center and El Segundo team who worked to pull this all together. It's certainly a topic that we take very seriously at SMC, and I'm excited to discuss it with you all today. As Steve alluded to, we are in the process of converting or redesignating Space and Missile Systems Center into a Space Systems Command later this summer, and diversity is a critical element of both the legacy SMC and the future SSC. SMC's current workforce is about 6,000 people, so it's vast and is already a very diverse group of people. And because of that, diversity and inclusion has been at the forefront of a lot of what we do. Diverse thoughts, backgrounds, experiences make us stronger in our teams and across our entire service, meaning the Space Force. Before we really dive deeper, making diversity and inclusion a priority at SMC, and I'd imagine Steve would probably agree with me here from an aerospace perspective, this is really not a conversation about perception or a set of well-timed initiatives that make us feel all warm and fuzzy. I'm sitting here today as a representative of the United States military because I wholeheartedly believe, and I think history shows us, that initiatives and programs that we instill about diversity and inclusion are making us a stronger organization. Without diversity at SMC, we fail our mission, and that's just unacceptable to us. And so from a space acquisition perspective, from a science and technology a perspective, a research and development, production of satellites and rockets, contracting, legal reviews, everything we do here at the center, diversity makes us stronger. And if we're not a diverse organization, then we do in fact fail in our mission. And so I really hope through our exchange today that we're able to foster some new ideas and build bridges with understanding and shared perspectives, not just across the U.S. Space Force's SMC and the Aerospace Corporation, but also across the larger community here in El Segundo, our neighbors, our friends, the people that we work with, our co-workers every day who are proud Southern Californians, proud to be either working in or living in or both the city of El Segundo and Los Angeles County. So Shad, again, thanks. I really look forward to the conversation today. It's an important one.
Thank you so much, General Thompson. Thank you both for your opening remarks. So I think we're going to go ahead and start digging into it. So for the first one, I think it's important. I don't know that this is going to be brand new to anyone, but I think we should go ahead and define those three words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if we can define those, and they seem to be somewhat separate concepts, but they're very interrelated. So we hear them together a lot. Could you guys speak to how you define these words and why they're linked together so often, how they work together? Steve, do you want to start this one?
Sure, thanks. You're right. I think many times we use the word diversity for shorthand, but really to be comprehensive, you've got to have equity and inclusion in that equation. Diversity is the ability to show that we have a group of people that represent much of America, but it doesn't do you any good if the people you have are not able to show their best and be their best and feel safe and respected in the workplace. So with regards to diversity, it is about having that representation of people with varying identities, backgrounds, and perspectives. And this includes both race and gender, but it also includes sexual identity, age, disability, military veteran status, and a whole lot more. Sir, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about some of the equity or inclusion, or you want me to take equity?
Well, so I tell you what, let me just pile on a little bit about what you said there, Steve. I absolutely agree with your definition of diversity there. But from a public institution like the United States military's perspective, and again, we are a United States Space Force here at SMC, and we have a combination of United States Air Force Airmen and United States Space Force Guardians that are part of the team. From a diversity standpoint, we think that our organization and really the DoD writ large needs to be representative of the nation that we are charged in defending, right? And so we have seen countless times throughout history where underrepresentation in government organizations or military entities has led to decisions being made by those who don't fully understand the problem set and might have had a chance to understand that problem set had their organization represented their society and culture and done it in the diverse way that that society or culture represented itself. So within the world of space acquisition, an example might be, hey, if we're going to develop an application, a satellite or some other kinds of system for our space warfighters or our space operators, and we don't even include them in the conversation of what the actual requirements are for that system, that would be really silly. So why would we attempt to serve a diverse nation without including diversity in the service? So I'm sorry, I just wanted to amplify that, Steve, from the fact that we're a public entity representing the United States of America, and we feel like we have to be like and look like and feel like the communities that we represent.
Yeah, and so just to finish, so equity and inclusion, certainly equity is about that fair treatment. Equity recognizes that everyone doesn't have the same experiences. We are different people, and we need different kinds of support and to address some of these structural inequalities, whether it's current or historical. On the inclusion front, it is about creating that culture of belonging where everyone feels safe, valued, and able to participate. And again, I think you need all three legs of the stool to really make the kind of progress that we need. I think, again, too often we cite statistics, but we lose sight of the fact of the equity and inclusion piece.
Yeah, Steve, very, very well said. From my standpoint, and I'll be a simple, I'll be a Pittsburgh guy here for a minute. Diversity is building an organization of different thoughts, different races, different sexual orientations, different genders. Inclusion is making sure everybody feels like a part of that organization, a part of the team. And equity is with everybody on that team being feeling like, or maybe not even feeling like, actually being treated in an equitable manner compared to everybody else on that team. It's really the fabric of our workplace culture. I agree with you completely that that is a three-legged stool. And if one of those even just one of those legs gets loose, so to speak, or breaks, the strength and resiliency of our stool fails and we don't achieve our mission.
Excellent stuff, guys. Thank you so much. I love that you have introduced the representation, which is such a big piece of diversity, and it's come out naturally even in the first question and in the one of the examples that was given earlier. So great stuff. Thanks so much for that. As we move to the next one of the questions we've heard is why are DEI efforts important? I think another way to look at that, and what I try to have the conversation with people, is what can be gained when we make progress in the DEI initiatives. And another way to look at it is what's at stake if we don't. If we have a purely homogenous, what do we risk by not addressing some of the ideas you guys have both mentioned about the value of diversity? General Thompson, we want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, Shad. That's a great question. The way we approach diversity and inclusion as leaders in the Department of Defense really has to reflect the need, as I mentioned earlier, that diversity and inclusion is a key component of our warfighting capabilities and our readiness. The value diversity brings to the workforce and the country is something we can't afford to lose in our service or in the broader community. Here at SMC, we're not what I would say at the pointy end of the spear in terms of being warfighters. We're providing the space materiel and capabilities for our space operators. And so from a business perspective, let me just say that several studies across multiple industries have illustrated that diversity, equity, and inclusion have tremendous benefit to the mission. So if you look at, for instance, the McKinsey company, they published a series of studies, I think in 2015, 2018, and then maybe one last year in 2020. And their data set clearly shows that the most diverse companies are more likely now than ever to outperform less diverse peers in terms of profitability, okay? And those diversity winners are able to be the most diverse companies because they're adopting systematic business-led approaches to inclusion and diversity. So inclusion and diversity make you stronger. One of the critical aspects of diversity and inclusion really, I think, is increasing the level of communication about it, right? Open, honest, vulnerable, really. Communication flow is really invaluable in pretty much every aspect of life, and diversity and inclusion is really no different. These are really hard conversations, though, and we have to have them, which means people tend to avoid them, right? They are hard, they're uncomfortable. People shy away from them. They're afraid that it'll result in an argument, or they'll get in trouble, or it will create acrimony in the workforce. But the bottom line is, if you're not having those hard conversations, you're inevitably making the situation worse. Steve?
Yeah, in fact, General Thompson, you said it right. You wouldn't be a 21st century CEO if you didn't believe that DEI is critical to the profitability and ultimately the success of your company. I was looking at a research study from a reputable organization a couple of weeks ago where they took two control groups. They did one where people get to choose who's part of their group. And then they did one that was just randomly selected and brought people together. And then they gave them different problems to go solve. And then they asked them afterwards, which group did they think actually performed better? The vast majority said, well, it was with the people that I knew. But actually, they showed statistically that it was being with a group of strangers that actually brought forward the kind of conversations that opened up people's minds to other opportunities. That is not at all intuitive, but I think that's a fact. And in fact, I've seen it myself. I'll just raise a couple of examples. Earlier in my career, I was at NASA, and we had to deal with 2 space shuttle accidents. Big deal. And one of the things that I think is common across 2 of them is that this whole notion of sort of equity and inclusion, giving people not only the ability to go out and be smart, but to actually come to the table, share ideals, feel empowered that they can speak up, feel it's a safe place to express differences from no matter what direction that they're coming from. And it's because of the failure of having those kinds of conversations that some of the disasters that we saw in the shuttle program could have been avoided. A big lesson learned. Same thing with innovation. Innovation does not happen when you get a bunch of like-minded people sitting around the table saying, I agree, boss. Innovation happens when someone speaks those magic words that says, hey, have you considered? And that's the kind of stuff that I think brings about the kinds of opportunities that we need going forward. And it's all about creating that kind of a culture where people feel really empowered no matter who you are, what kind of person you are, whether you're a table pounder or a quiet person at the table. We all need to know as managers that we need to bring out the best of people and give them that opportunity to feel safe and respected in that environment. And at the end of the day, you will be a much stronger organization as a result.
Yeah, Steve, hearing people from all walks of life is absolutely essential because it's really, just think about it from a personality perspective. It's really difficult to consider, understand, or even empathize with somebody if you've never sat down with them and tried to hear their perspective with an open mind, right? And in the United States Space Force, we're very lucky to have General Jay Raymond as our Chief of Space Operations. I will tell you that he has personally made diversity and inclusion a key initiative and a guiding principle in what we do. So much so that he personally chairs our quarterly diversity and inclusion executive council. We just had one last week. It was conducted virtually, and that involves every organization in the Space Force, which includes SMC. And it's meant to ensure that we're improving on focusing our efforts more on diversity and inclusion and hearing what other people are doing in order to try and make their particular unit or their geographic location stronger. So it's kind of a best practices, lessons learned forum. And my boss leads it for the entire team as the CEO, if you will, the CEO of the Space Force.
That's excellent. Really good stuff, guys. I think something that I heard through your responses, we talk about the feelings that happen when we avoid these conversations. It's going to be a hard conversation. And you both mentioned how all the studies show that these diverse teams, while not as comfortable, outperform the comfortable teams. And I read some statement, I won't say it exactly like it was said, but it's along the idea that the constant challenges of your ideas and the other folks challenging each other's ideas, it's actually the thing that makes us uncomfortable is the thing that drives the high performance, which is interesting because when you think about it, it makes sense. But I think in that room with 4 people you don't agree with, people will, hey, this isn't working. Let me go back to a safe space. So really great to call out those different aspects of the facts that these diverse groups are outperforming and why it may not feel comfortable doing it, but it gets the job done. Thank you, guys. So if we get a little more tactical, what initiatives and programs do you guys have in place today? I think I've heard a couple of things that you guys are working on, or anything that you have today, or anything that you might be putting into place, and how do you communicate these efforts to your workforce? If you can tell me anything about how how this comes from the leader and how it's received, anything along those lines. Steve, do you want to start here?
Sure. I mentioned that, I have a nice picture of the first CEO signing a commitment to diversity in 1961 with the then Vice President, Lyndon Johnson. So you've got to say, well, you must be there. But the fact of the matter is, I think George Floyd showed that, we had all, including ourselves at Aerospace, sometimes you could slip in the mode of just being, it's sort of a compliance thing. You're just going to kind of check the box. You kind of get into a natural motion of things. The thing about the George Floyd is, I think it really opened up some wounds that were there that people were not recognizing. We had town hall meetings with individuals that, to their credit, really opened up from their heart and shared experiences that I had not heard before. And it really opened my eyes to realize that, boy, we got a lot of work to do. So, we took at what we started with on the foundation and said, all right, we need to be much more strategic in terms of what we need to do. And we came out with 6 areas in particular that we have focused on. Number one is recruitment. Obviously you need to bring in those individuals to make a difference. Retention. It doesn't do any good to bring in those people if they're just walking out at the same rate that you're bringing them in. And in today's highly competitive marketplace, you've got to pay a lot of attention to retention. Representation. As I mentioned earlier, when I was talking about Sarisha flying on Virgin Galactic, it is important that people can see themselves at the senior levels of your organization. And so it's not good enough just to bring people out of school. People need to see themselves as vice presidents, as CEOs, and to be sort of motivated by that. Education and training. We put a lot of effort into unconscious bias. You could be a good person. And I think we have all good people at Aerospace, but sometimes you just have blind spots. You say things that maybe if somebody hears it differently. You act in ways that you didn't realize. It sort of biases the system. You select people in terms of filling positions that, again, tend to be people that tend to look more like you than perhaps if you would consider other opportunities. We also know that we've got to motivate more kids in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, and math. We've got to create that pipeline, and we've got to create it in schools, that are underrepresented kids are, and get them motivated to want to join the workforce. And then finally is what we're doing here today, which I think is also really important, which is the community outreach. We've got to work with our communities. We've got to make the effort to go outside of our gates, to reach out, to work with the local city, law enforcement, and so on, so that we have a community where people live and work and want to stay, as I think the key. So those are the 6 things we're focusing on. We have champions in the organization that lead those efforts. I hold myself personally accountable in terms of communicating, being committed to it. I hold myself accountable when I speak to my board, and I do it with my employees as well as outside the gate. So it's a pretty comprehensive effort, and we do know it will not be solved overnight. We've been doing this for 60 years, and we realize how much further we have to go. So we've just got to double down on our efforts.
Yeah, so Steve, that was a great answer. Obviously, as very close mission partners with you all, we're closely tracking your initiatives and your the categories in terms of how you've put them into your strategy. Let me just, for the sake of brevity here, instead of going through our categories and things like that are so similar, let me just talk about several of the initiatives that we've implemented here at SMC. All of these are still ongoing efforts. We're trying to work very hard to improve them, iterate on them, think about them, and take action so that we can improve the diversity and equity and inclusion culture here at SMC. So just a few examples of some programs, some of which are very similar to what Steve and his team are doing, Shad, are things like working with diverse colleges and universities in the local area to attract even more diverse talent than we already have inside our fence line. Making sure that from a future leadership perspective that we're ensuring diversity is considered in all of our hiring panel membership situations, working with DoD leadership to secure funding of undergraduate degrees for kids from underrepresented LA County high schools, and then maybe secretly hoping, maybe not so secretly hoping, that after they get their degrees, they'll consider employment or a career or a calling in the United States Space Force upon their graduation. We've created digital exit interviews for our workforce so that we can gather data to inform our future retention efforts. A digital strategic career action plan for all of our members, focusing on diversity to identify functional and kind of foundational competencies to provide equal opportunity to everybody for success. I'm also very excited, Steve mentioned STEM. I'm also very excited about a partnership that SMC has started with the STEM Coalition. It involves over 50 members of my team here and over 80 members from the Southern California community to engage with students grades 2 through 6 in underserved communities to get them excited about STEM, get them excited about the Space Force. We've had 11 classroom events thus far, some at Hawaiian Avenue Elementary, some at Zella Davis Elementary, and we aim to get into more classrooms here in the very near future. Our goal is 52 classrooms in 52 weeks. And then we'll assess the program to see how successful it was. Clearly, there's more than 52 classrooms here in the South Bay. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to grow the program if we find at the end of the prototyping phase that it was successful. Also, just an internal initiative that I've personally really enjoyed participating in is we started a top 4 mentorship program here. The top 4 leaders at the center, myself, my vice commander, Brigadier General Jason Cawthorn, my executive director, Miss Joy White, and my recently departed, in fact, recently retired command chief, Lisa Arnold. We've started a mentorship program that we call the Shadow Program here with the command team, where a couple of times a month we're bringing in members of our junior workforce so that we can learn about issues that they are living through in our workforce. It also helps us to understand, not just from a diversity and inclusion perspective, but also the junior workforce better. We're providing opportunities for those people who go through the program for more long-term mentorship with the senior leader that they shadowed with. And so, for instance, a number of my shadows have accompanied me on trips in the local area. In fact, Steve mentioned our friends down at Vox Space in Long Beach. And so I've taken a number of my shadows down there to be part of a tour and a discussion with Dan Hart, who runs the show down there currently, on temporary duty to a launch that we went to last month. I was able to take one of my shadows with me. And I just feel like, although you can make mentoring really a formal process, having more of an informal conversation and the ability to access underrepresented groups to the senior leadership of the center is beneficial to both the mentor and the mentee. At our division level, we're still doing small focus groups ever since the murder of George Floyd. We've conducted those to provide an opportunity for our underrepresented groups to kind of discuss their current dynamics in both the United States and then anything that they're seeing in the local community or inside the fence line here at SMC. I know many people are aware that the Department of the Air Force recently completed a racial disparity review, specifically focused on our African American teammates. The results of those surveys, in a very transparent manner, were published for everybody to see. And I think that report gives a good starting point to measure kind of what we need to do next. The Inspector General of the Department of the Air Force, Lieutenant General Sami Saeed, is working on a 6-month progress report from that initial racial disparity review. And we have ongoing another racial disparity review or another disparity review that focuses in on other races, ethnicities, and genders beyond African Americans. We want to be able to gauge, though, our progress based on Department of the Air Force initiatives, United States Space Force initiatives, and SMC initiatives, because I don't think that any one strategic, operational, or tactical level is going to get it all right the first time. We've got to look at our initiatives holistically, and as I said, share best practices and also lessons learned about maybe what didn't work so well.
That's great. Thank you, guys. I think it's notable that when it comes to recruitment, which is a big buzzword in today's, it's a hot time for people to find a new job. I think you guys, I heard words like elementary schools, STEM, we're not talking about, where's the 27-year-old talent? I think that's a really critical piece here. There's a pipeline that starts much younger. And when that becomes more full, this process will make more sense. But I also love the concept of having people who are younger and maybe not fully professional career just yet. Maybe they're in high school or college, getting exposure to things like what you guys do, which is super cool. But there's not really, that I know of, a time for them to sort of see what that's like and get interested. So by college, they can start really, digging in. So that's really exciting stuff. So I want to just touch on a concept around how it's going. Is there anything that you're doing a lot of things in both companies, anything that you think is working particularly well, or anything that has not been working as well as we had hoped? And maybe it's more about how we measure our progress, because this is a tricky one to measure, right? We have goals, but it's not as cut and dried as a sales number. Any thoughts there? General, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure, I'll start. Last year, after the civil unrest associated with the murder of George Floyd, we held a number of what I could best characterize as diversity luncheons, where I brought small groups together to break bread, but also to talk in a safe space about diversity and inclusion within SMC. I wanted to make sure I was hearing from our minority workforce members regarding their experiences with racial disparity at SMC, within the United States military, in the greater Los Angeles area, and kind of throughout their careers. And the results of those discussions led to the really immediate implementation of a number of tasks. I mentioned a couple already, like the Top 4 Mentorship Program, but we also formed a diversity inclusion tiger team, a diversity inclusion board, and started establishing metrics reviews. My command chief, Arnold, did monthly voluntary discussions with a number of our enlisted personnel in an open forum and a format which allowed diversity and inclusion items to be discussed in a non-attribution environment. And what we found was that in some areas, Shad, where we thought we were really good, like ensuring that our hiring and our promotion processes were free of racial disparity, what we found was the metrics indicated that, well, they might be technically free of racial disparity, but we have a long way to go and some other things we need to include to make sure that we're making real progress in this area. And so I think my answer to your questions really comes down to, it's not about feel good. It's not about generalities or narratives that make everybody feel good. It's about results, right? And those results have to be driven by metrics. And the metrics that we finally took a hard look at showed us that all of our feel good talk, all of our empathizing, if you will, with racial disparity really wasn't working that well. And so we've had to take some different initiatives to get after those metrics. Some of those metrics, by the way, they're not, I'm going to solve this in a day. All right. They're more along the lines of, I'm going to solve this in a generation, or at least a generation of employment. In other words, it's not going to be 3 months or 1 year. We might start to see a turning of the tide in a couple of years. A great example is initiatives that we've been broadening, like with members of the Navajo Nation Committee, who working with the Navajo Nation president for us working with him to recruit from that underrepresented group. Something we really need to harp on, my opinion, is that diversity is only as good as its execution, right? And so getting to those results, meaning that really without equity or inclusion, those with diverse opinions or thoughts may not be, we may not be communicating well with them, and then we're losing out on the benefit of their great comms. This is a hard conversation, as I said before. I don't believe there's ever going to truly be a right answer, but we're using tools and metrics at our disposal to analyze and iterate on our results, as opposed to just maybe the the kind of feel good stuff that is sometimes important, but maybe doesn't get us to the end that we have in mind to get to. Steve?
Yeah, I mean, General Thompson, you pretty much said it all, and you said it extremely well. And you said it in your opening comments. It is about having those difficult conversations, and it's easy to dance yourself around the core of the issue. We do spend a lot of time on discussions, both open and anonymous questions that I get, and I'll field in an open fashion. We do surveys, and those surveys have shown us there's some places we're doing really well. And frankly, there's some areas that when you break it down by different groups, you'll find a real disparity. And it sort of says, I did not expect to find that kind of difference. And so it really helps managers. And we don't ding managers for those disparities. We use it as an opportunity to learn and make it safe for managers to go in and to try to address it and make goals for themselves that they can then also be held accountable over time in terms of achieving what needs to be done. I think we're doing really well on recruitment. I think we're doing much better on retention. We're not just waiting for people to leave. We're speaking to them to convince them to stay. We're having the training programs. But the one area that I do think is the biggest challenge is in representation. If you look at the pyramid of the organization, our numbers are astounding at the lower levels. In fact, our current internship class is nearly 60% of people in color, and we have twice the number of women engineers that are interning with our organization. But as you go up the ladder, you'll start to see the percents drop off, really, really quickly. And this is an area that I've personally put a lot of effort into, and as a team, we're putting effort to. And sometimes I get challenged by some folks who say, "Sir, what's more important for the organization right now? Is it diversity or is it the technical excellence?" And I say it's an and. It is not an or question. In fact, I strongly believe that you enhance technical excellence by enlarging the pool of individuals that are available to you to bring them in to become those technical experts. And this is a conversation that you've got to repeat over and over. You've got to demonstrate it. I think we are showing it ourselves, but it is a hard discussion. I'd like to think that someday that question is just going to go away, but I know that's with us for the time being. And so I think, as General Thompson said, we've got to show results. It's not just about talking and survey. It's about results.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's, really, really strong answers. And I think there's, again, it's new. I feel like both of your companies are fairly advanced on this journey. We, as part of the DEI community, we have a chance to talk to a lot of folks in the workplaces, plus just, relationships that I have. They're like, so what are other people doing? It's a common question today. I think you guys are giving really thoughtful, I want to call them almost hard answers, because again, like we've already talked about the feelings. And the questions that I know other leaders are being asked too, why is this thing cutting into this time on this major thing that we all understand, or almost like we all agree is a big thing. It's sort of like it sounds like you guys are really focusing on the results, which don't come easy. And like you both said, will not be gone, next month. So thank you for being so candid on the journey and how hard it actually can be. And it sounds like you have great efforts. You guys, again, like I said at the beginning, you guys are leaders in this space for sure. So for the last question, I'm gonna jumble a couple things together. There are many companies looking to sort of put together a DEI, program. And these companies are of all different sizes. There are smaller companies, similar size companies. And I think what I've heard from a lot of folks is we don't have the resources. We don't have this. We have these kind of deadlines. We owe Wall Street numbers, all of these things that I hear. And my question would be, is there anything that is not sort of those specific things? I think what you guys are talking about are much more foundational of how you look at the diversity. Anything that you guys could, present from your own takeaways that we could use anywhere? And the follow-up to that would be, how could we work together in El Segundo? Is there anything that we could do as a group, the city of El Segundo, SMC, Aerospace, and the other communities here? Anything else that we could do, to work together to, sort of help everyone be better at this? And I think, Steve, do you want to start there?
Sure, and I know we're quickly approaching the top of the hour, so I'll be really brief. But in short, I would recommend to any leader, take the time to listen and talk to your workforce. You'll be amazed how much you'll learn if you create that right environment. Second, this can't be a passing commitment. This can't be like, let's work hard the next 2 years and then let's go on to the next big thing. This is a multi-year effort. I was fortunate enough to be preceded as CEO by Wanda Austin, a Black woman who was one of the very few Black CEOs, and not to mention the fact of a highly technical company. That was her words of wisdom to me, is you have just got to have a lot of grit and hard effort to continue to push this and make it your responsibility. So when the next person follows you, it'll be in a better place than when you found it. And don't try to do everything at once. This is a journey, and this is not a sprint. And so, take it piece by piece, and by early examples, I think you'll get people behind you. And as far as El Segundo, again, I think what the city is doing is great. What I like about General Thompson is we learn from SMC. We try to learn from other organizations. I think it's this opportunity to work together, to partner. I'm really excited about the opportunity to continue to talk with the city and Chad, the things that you're doing as part of the DEI effort in your committee, developing those relationships, developing that trust, and exchanging the best practices that are out there.
So thanks, Steve. So that answer was outstanding. It was absolutely spot on. It's about leadership. If you think of yourself as a program manager or an accountant or an engineer, you're never going to solve this problem. You've got to be a leader. You have to communicate with your workforce. You have to be willing to hear what maybe you don't want to hear so much, but you need to hear it. And then you have to take action against what you hear, right? And then in terms of how we work together, I will tell you one of the big lessons learned that we had from the global pandemic was that, and with, at some points, 95% of our workforce in a telework environment, away from the team environment, the team of teams environment that we have here at SMC on so many of our programs. Connectedness is so absolutely critical, and keeping connected to your workforce. And so as a leader, with demonstrating leadership, communicating with your people, and then just like we're doing today between SMC, Aerospace, and El Segundo, we're staying connected so that we can be a stronger team for here in the South Bay area and beyond.
Thank you, guys. Absolutely crushed it. So that wraps up our Q&A portion. Wanted to move into our closing remarks. General Thompson, I have you as going first. Would you like to give us your closing remarks?
Yeah, I guess I'll just go back to a point I made at the beginning and a point that I know Steve has amplified throughout the session. There's no such thing as an easy conversation about diversity and inclusion. As we move away from the George Floyd murder, and and we've mentioned Mr. Floyd's name a number of times here. It's not just Mr. Floyd, I think, as everybody knows. As we move away from the social unrest associated with that, and as we hopefully move away from divisive conversations about diversity and inclusion within the society, it's even more important that we keep our dialogue going. Our nation can't afford to ostracize any of our citizens, right? The talent that we have here cannot be talent and achievement based on people's race, religion, sexual orientation, or gender. Achievement should be not based on any of those things. Achievement should be based upon achievement and achievement alone. So it's really everybody's time to choose. And I choose to have difficult conversations, and I would ask you all, implore you all really, to have those difficult conversations, learn what you can from them, and then take action to right the wrongs that that you identify. Thanks very much, Shad. I really appreciated my time here, and I'll kick it over to Steve.
Thank you, General Thompson. Much appreciated.
Shad, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to be here. And I want to thank General Thompson for joining me. Your enthusiasm and passion on this topic is really inspiring. So I want to thank you for doing it. A few months ago, I was invited to join the El Segundo Board of Governors. And I balked at first because I said I would only join if I really understood where the city was with regard to its commitment to DEI. And I was really impressed. In my conversations with Scott Mitnick, who's the city manager, talked about the things that were underway, like the DEI committee, and that this is one of the top priorities. The city knows there's a lot of work to do, and the benefit of creating the environment that would be not only helpful for the city, but would bring in the kind of businesses that would continue to make El Segundo a hub of innovation, and I hope for a hub of innovation for the space program. So I thank him. I know the mayor's trying to take the right steps, and just the fact that we're having this conversation, I couldn't thank you all enough for doing that. I think El Segundo can be a leading city in the DEI efforts in the South Bay, and hopefully a model for the rest of the nation. So, and I hopefully that we at Aerospace have a chance to contribute to that dialogue. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Steve. And in closing, I would just like to say, first, another huge thank you to our two panelists and the members of their staff that helped us put this together. They're leaders in their field and in our El Segundo community, and we're really blessed to have them participating today. It was excellent, so thank you. I also want to thank the City of El Segundo and the staff there for helping to make this possible. And finally, I want to thank you, the participants, whether you're in attendance today or watching this on a replay. As we heard today, there are great benefits for both our businesses and our community to invest in DEI initiatives, and we can use your help as we continue working to ensure that El Segundo remains a great place to work, live, and visit. Thank you, guys.